so I'm Maggie Mehling. Most of you are familiar faces, so this doesn't need to be formal. If you have questions as we're going, please jump in, interject. Feel free to ask me right in the moment. You don't have to hold your questions to the end. So this talk is on Shakespeare and Autism, a project that we have been working on here at the Nisonger Center for several years now, and so I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to share this work with you. First, to acknowledge a lot of our contributors, obviously Mark Tasse and also Robin Post, who's with us today. Robin is a faculty in the Department of Theater and is really at the heart and soul of this work. I'm presenting her contributions in this presentation as well, so Robin, jump in if anything goes astray from the theater perspective. I'd also like to acknowledge Kelly Hunter. She's the artistic director of Shakespeare and Autism, affiliated with OSU, previous affiliation with the Royal Shakespeare Company, and she is the creator of the Hunter Heartbeat Method. Leslie Ferris, a distinguished professor in the Department of Theater, who's one of our collaborators. Also on the core acting team, these individuals have been with us since the beginning in implementing this work. Suzanne Davis, research assistant at the Nisonger Center. Additionally, other graduate students, assistants who've helped with ADOS administration, data collection, etc. We're very appreciative. We're grateful for our collaboration with Columbus Public Schools, Worthington School District, and our new collaboration with the Hogland Learning Center. And I want to acknowledge our funding source, the Outreach and Engagement Grant from The Ohio State University. So kind of an overview of what we'll be talking about today. I'll be giving an introduction and overview to the nature of the collaboration that has allowed for this work to take place. I'll give a presentation on the Hunter Heartbeat Method itself. What is this methodology? Where did it come from? And some information with regard to recruitment and training of the actors who are implementing the intervention. And then I'll show a couple video clips of the intervention itself. And then I'll present some of our research goals for both our pilot and our larger scale study and discuss results. And then I'll share a little bit about our next steps and future directions for the project. So before we get started, I just wanted to highlight the collaborations that really allowed this work to take place through Kelly Hunter's collaboration with the Royal Shakespeare Company and the Royal Shakespeare Company's collaboration with the Ohio State University Department of Theater. We at Ohio State were fortunate enough to be chosen to be the site for this research, so it is then through our collaboration with the Department of Theater that this research has been able to take place. So first I want to give a little overview of the features of autism and why we feel that a drama-based intervention could be an effective means for treating social deficits associated with autism spectrum disorder. So as most of you are familiar, core deficits of autism include impairments in social communication and the presence of restrictive and repetitive behaviors. There is it's a small body of literature, but there is some literature out there that does support the use of drama as an effective intervention for targeting these core deficits associated with autism. So we know that drama offers a structured approach for enabling and motivating hard-to-reach children to participate more meaningfully in the social world. And it is the idea that a drama-based intervention is really creating a very safe and structured social world where these children can practice these interactions and put skills to real use in a context that is safe, protected, and structured. Also, we know that engaging children with autism in playful activity can strengthen those aspects of brain functioning necessary for more flexible thinking, impacting communication skills and social interaction. So this is the idea that although there are many curriculums developed that teach, specific social responses to certain situations and have role playing, this translates well to the social world, but the act of engaging in drama where there's a dynamic exchange evolving between an actor and a child, or between a child and another child, really allows them to practice flexible interaction. And we think that this is an important aspect of why drama is an effective intervention for these social deficits associated with autism. So now I'm going to give a little overview of the Hunter Heartbeat Method itself and the recruitment and training of actors, and then show a brief video clip of a session of Shakespeare Autism. So the Hunter Heartbeat Method was created by Kelly Hunter, who is an actress from the UK and a director as well. And she began this work about 10 years ago when she had her own theater company, and essentially the purpose of this company was to bring access to Shakespeare and access to the arts to children who did not previously have access to the arts. So she was pushing into schools, working with various groups of children, and started to work with some children that had autism spectrum disorders. And she realized that her work needed to be adapted in order to make the Shakespearean experience more accessible to these children. And through these types of interactions, Kelly developed the Hunter Heartbeat Method and used this with children across the UK as she toured with the Royal Shakespeare Company for, years and years and years, modifying the work and really developing these core games that we now call the Hunter Heartbeat Method. So what is this methodology? The Hunter Heartbeat Method is a series of games founded in Shakespearean text, rhythm, and storytelling. So each game has a specific objective meant to target specific characteristics of autism spectrum disorder. So for example, there are games that target eye contact. So the children will be working with an actor, and in the context of a story or an interaction between two characters, there's a moment where they're engaging in eye contact and then something funny or exciting happens. There's games of imitation where they're moving throughout space, imitating another actor. There's games where they're generating different facial emotions and practicing, happy, sad, etc. So each game has a specific objective embedded in the context of one of Shakespeare's works. So the present study we're doing is using The Tempest as a model for these games. So the games follow the plot of The Tempest throughout a session, but each have isolated skills that they're working on. And an important aspect of these games is that they can be tailored to meet specific needs of the children. So one child who is a little bit more high functioning, more verbal, etc., maybe, saying a couple phrases or lines as he interacts with the game, whereas another child may be doing the game modified in a more basic way. So this enables children of all different ability levels, full range of intellectual functioning, to participate in these games. So some important foundations of why both from a psychological and from a theater perspective, why we feel these games are effective. So structure, play, and empowerment are essential to the implementation of this work. Structure in that there's structure within and across different sessions of Shakespeare and Autism. There's a physical structure, so Robin, who runs each session, takes a circle out on the floor, and actors and children are seated around this circle. And so they have a physical boundary, they're doing certain things when they're in the circle, certain things when they're outside of the circle. There's also a structure to how each session begins and ends, and this is consistent across the duration of the intervention. So repetition and routine are utilized within and across sessions to give participants a sense of predictability. Games are repeated and expanded upon across weeks, months, full duration of the intervention. So children really have an opportunity to get into this routine, know what to expect, and then develop and grow as each game is elaborated upon. And praise is used primarily to reinforce desired behaviors. We've never had a child with a significant behavior problem, but in that case, Mark or I would come in and help with that. So the actors are really just creating a fun, playful space and using differential praise to reinforce kids for what they like that they're doing. So a typical session of Shakespeare Autism. Each session begins with children and actors seated in a circle and a hello heartbeat. I see some members of Shakespeare Autism here, so I'm sure I can get at least some of you to indulge me in a hello heartbeat. This begins with the rhythm of the heart, tapped on the chest. Look at Robin, what a treat. So it begins with this tapping on the chest. Everyone can feel free to participate. This is a safe space. And then once everyone's on a similar rhythm, the children start to say hello. Hello, 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 hello. We are a room of primarily non-theater department individuals, so I really appreciate that effort on everyone's part. That was great. Well done. Mark and I often joke that if psychologists were running this intervention, it would not be as effective. People may feel uncomfortable engaging in that. An aside, there was one time I was observing a session and helping with a little girl. She was seated very far back from the circle, and I was helping her approximately become closer and closer through reinforcing her for scooting closer to the circle. However, I had not anticipated that soon that was going to mean that I was in the circle as well as her. I hadn't thought that through, so when we got up to the circle together, I felt very successful as a psychologist for helping her behavior, move closer and closer to the circle. But then I found myself in the circle having to participate and stretching my comfort zone. And so each session begins that way with the hello heartbeat. And the children then progress from just saying a hello to doing a happy hello, a sad hello, an angry hello, looking at each other, greeting each other as the session begins. This is a predictable way that each session starts, getting all the children on the same page. In addition, it ends with a goodbye heartbeat. So starting and ending with the sound of the heartbeat, allowing everyone to settle, focus, get in the right mindset. After the hello heartbeat, 2 or more actors will typically demonstrate the first game in the center of the circle. Some games are repeated from previous sessions to, get the story going again. Robin is the one who is overseeing all of the facilitators, so she's kind of the storyteller, telling the plot of The Tempest and calling actors into the center of the circle where they begin to demonstrate the games. The children watch and then may or may not have an opportunity to try the game initially there in the center of the circle. And then after that time, actors pair off with children, either one actor with one child or one actor with 2 children. And they go to different corners of the room and practice the game. So they play the game with the actor, and a very important aspect of this is role reversals. So let's say it's a game where, a child is following an actor around, imitating his movement. And then at some point they will switch and the actor will follow the child around, imitating the child's movement. So in each game, the child has the opportunity to play both roles, which is very beneficial for perspective taking and allowing the child that opportunity to both follow and lead and experience both of those aspects of a dynamic interaction. So actors and children pair off and practice these games, and then the groups return to the circle. And each child is given the opportunity with the actor with whom they've been working to come into the center of the circle and demonstrate the game that they had just been working on. So the children will come into the middle of the circle and everyone watches as they demonstrate the game they just worked on and then claps when they're done. So this is really reinforcing, and just from the few sessions I've observed, children that seemed much more timid in the beginning and were not willing to come into the circle, after a couple weeks, they were getting right in there and participating, so that was a nice change to see. An important aspect is that all games introduce a character from the play who interacts with another character. So each game has these dynamic exchanges between characters that allow children to step into a role and explore and experiment with that. Some games are simultaneously played by the whole group in the context of the circle, so that's a little change, and then each session ends with a goodbye heartbeat. And again, these sessions were held an hour a week, so they're just 1 hour long, once a week. Many people ask, well, why couldn't you use any drama? Why Shakespeare? Why is it important that it's based on Shakespeare versus any other given play? Many people feel that Shakespeare is more difficult to access as it is, so why start with this with children that already have a communicative block? So the first reason I've been enlightened upon is the rhythm of the poetry. So Shakespeare's work is written in iambic pentameter. This is the rhythm of the heartbeat. Some call this the rhythm of life. And it's believed that this is a soothing rhythm that is beneficial to the children and is held as a very important tenet of this work by Kelly Hunter. Each session begins and ends with the heartbeat and serves the purpose of calming the children, getting them into a place where they're ready to begin the work. Second reason is the epic nature of the storytelling and the character's expression and experience of the world. So in Shakespeare, his work has heightened expression in the terms of language, physicality, and emotion. So these are big emotions, big physical movements, big stories, easy for the child to grasp the angry character or the sad character because the emotions are exaggerated. So this work really lends itself to exploring expression in a way that children can develop their own interpretation of the character, what the character could be feeling, and really have the opportunity to explore that. In addition, because of the nature of Shakespeare's work, each actor really has a varied delivery of the character. So as children have the opportunity to work with different actors, even if they're playing the same game with a different person, they could be having a very different experience. So this really empowers the children to use their imagination and creativity with these characters in a way that maybe wouldn't be quite as possible with someone else's play. In addition, as I mentioned previously, children have the opportunity to play both roles, and Shakespeare really sets up nice dichotomies of interaction with leaders and followers and initiators of emotion and responders. So children really have the opportunity to get in both aspects of the exchange. So sessions, as I mentioned, are facilitated by highly skilled undergraduate and graduate level actors. These actors were specifically selected for their strengths in deep listening and responding, ability to explore a wide range of physical and emotional choices, and their playfulness. So from watching these sessions, it's become clear that an actor who would be uncomfortable or self-conscious would not be successful in this work. So the actor's ease and playfulness really seems to put the children at ease and help them to participate more fully. Robin Post facilitates the sessions, so she is the storyteller who's directing the flow and timing of the session, and then actors are engaging more actively in the play with the children, pairing off into groups, etc. And this is conducted with, very low actor to child ratio, so we typically either have one actor to one child or one actor to 2 children, but this is not significantly different from other interventions we see for kids with an autism spectrum disorder. And an important aside before we get into the second half of the talk where we're discussing the research and our ability to evaluate whether this is benefiting children or not, I had asked Robin to comment on whether or not she felt this benefited the actors. Is from their perspective, are the actors growing? Is this a beneficial experience for them? And the conclusion was absolutely. So in addition to meeting needs of the children, this project has had a significant benefit for the actors involved, both in the capacity to use their skills in an impacting way, but also to develop their skills as an actor. So now I have a little video clip that I would like to show of a session. So we'll have to see, let me know if you can hear it in the back. We just hook these speakers up.
I'm going to take my lead off Luke and we're going to say a happy hello. Hello, 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 hello. And we'll go around the circle this time.
Hello. Hello. Hello! 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 Hello!
Rest our hands, and now we're going to loose out a little. Loose back.
Hello!
Hello. Hello.
Hello! Hello!
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello!
Hello. Before Caliban ever learns to speak, and when Miranda and Prospero, her father, first come to the island, they find Caliban, and he doesn't know how to speak. He has some other kind of language and thing that he does. So we're going to see that. And then Miranda, Prospero's daughter, tries to teach him his name.
Blah, 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 blah,
I'm
blah, blah, blah,
Miranda. You are Caliban.
Caliban!
Caliban.
Caliban!
My name is Miranda. You're Caliban. Caliban. Caliban.
You're Caliban.
Caliban.
That's it. All right, good job.
Caliban. Caliban.
Caliban.
Caliban.
Caliban.
Caliban.
Caliban.
Caliban starts to feel special feelings for Miranda because what did Miranda just do for him?
He taught him how to speak.
Right. She just taught him how to speak, so he feels very close to her. So when Miranda starts to walk about the island, Caliban comes up.
Hello, ho, ho.
Too close. Goodbye.
Hello, ho, ho.
Too close. Goodbye. Hello, ho, ho.
Too close. Goodbye.
Hello, ho, ho.
Too close. Goodbye.
Hello, ho, ho.
Too close. Goodbye.
Hello, ho ho. Too close. Goodbye. Hello, ho ho. Too close. Goodbye. Hello, ho ho. Too close. Goodbye. Hello, ho ho. Too close. Goodbye.
Hello, ho, ho.
Too close. Goodbye.
Hello, ho, ho.
Too close. Goodbye.
Hello, ho, ho. Hello, ho, ho.
Too close. Goodbye. 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 Goodbye.
Goodbye. Good work. We'll rest our hands and we'll see you guys next week. You're gonna go meet your family or friends or whoever you get to.
Bye, Sarah.
All right, so that is a little 5-minute version of what's going on. It's really I think, beneficial to show a video because it's difficult to describe what they're doing and what's going on in these sessions without a little bit of a video demonstration. But it's that kind of playfulness and those types of games that are really at the heart and soul of this intervention. So, to significantly switch gears from talking about the nature of the Hunter Heartbeat Method, where it came from, how it's structured, I'm now going to talk to you about the research that we've been conducting on the Hunter Heartbeat Method. I'll talk about our goals, design, and future directions. So we'll be talking about a pilot study that was conducted, a current study we're conducting in the Columbus City School District, and then a little bit about our next step. So when we set out to conduct a pilot study on the Hunter Heartbeat Method, there were a lot of unknowns. There was a real meeting of the minds coming together and deciding how we would study this, what we would measure, what could be measured, how we were going to implement this. This is really the first time that this intervention had been implemented in a structured or at all standardized way. So we had a lot to come together on. So the aims of our pilot study were first and foremost to collect preliminary data on the efficacy of the intervention. So is this in fact impacting core symptoms of autism in a quantifiable, measurable way? Secondly, a goal was just to systematically implement this intervention. So, you know, they are talking games, we're talking tasks, they're talking, you know, about improvisation, we're talking about standardization. So coming together on, well, what are the critical elements of this intervention? What has to be the same every time? What can vary? Was a big goal of establishing in the pilot study. Third, identifying enrolling participants and identifying other logistical issues that would be relevant for scaling this project up to a larger scale study. So the pilot study was essentially, the intervention took place in the spring of 2012, really the winter season. So we began, you know, reviewing literature, preparing for this program in the autumn of 2011, and we began recruitment in the later autumn 2011 through December, and then the pilot group ran essentially in the winter, early spring of 2012. So our sample for this study was 14 children. These kids were recruited through local area schools. These were from the Worthington School District. We recruited from a couple different schools. And we selected these children based on their educational classification of autism and then the absence of severe behavior problems. And we gauged this both on teacher recommendation or report of children that had significant behaviors and also screened for with the NCBRF. And this is because this is not a behavioral intervention, and as this was our first time out of the chute, we figured that children with significant behaviors where they could be dangerous to themselves or other were probably not a good fit for this first pilot study. So our 14 children were aged about 10 and a half to almost 14 with a mean age of 12 years, 5 months. So this is the age range we were targeting. In the first study, we had 9 males and 5 females. And this is not the ADOS 2, but we did give an ADOS to all the children participating, and they all did continue to, their educational classification of autism continued to hold. These children were being identified as on the autism spectrum. So the methodology of the pilot study, we conducted pre-test evaluations to obtain baseline information on the children. This was a logistical experience that gave us much information for future studies about the process of pushing into a school during the school day and pulling children out of class time for testing. So we were able to do that with some logistical strategizing. Children were divided into 2 groups. We had a group of 8 and a group of 6 for this pilot. This is because we were conducting this study after school. So children were staying an hour after school And we initially had wanted to divide groups based on functional level, but with family, parent, after school schedules, we needed to divide based on availability of day of the week. So that ended up being very informative because it worked just fine to have children of varying levels mixed within the groups. So this was solely dependent on when they could come to the intervention. Children and it's important that there was no control group in this study. Both of these groups were receiving the same intervention. This pilot study lacked a control group entirely. So all 14 children were receiving Shakespeare Autism. And children participated in the intervention after school for an hour per week for 10 weeks. And there was approximately a 1-to-1 actor-to-student ratio. So again, very individualized, very intimate setting. They participated at the Kilbourne School in the Worthington School District. Some children had to be transported in from other schools after school, so that was a logistical challenge. We noticed that children that were being transported tended to arrive a couple minutes late, and this made them anxious and somewhat impaired their ability to participate, so we made note of that. And then following the intervention, we conducted post-test evaluations, and we developed a social validation questionnaire. We gave one to the parents, the teachers, and the child themselves, really just asking if they liked the intervention. We asked parents what we could have done to make it easier for them. We asked teachers the same thing, if they had any logistical difficulties they'd like us to take into account in the future. So these are the measures that we used in the pilot study. We first used an ADOS, pre-test only. We weren't looking for change on the ADOS, but we wanted to validate that autism education classification and ensure that we were indeed working with children on the spectrum. We also included the Nisonger Child Behavior Rating Form. So this is a rating scale that is targeted to detect problem behaviors in children. And we primarily included this as a screener for children that may have significant problem behaviors, as they would not have been appropriate for this intervention. We did administer it pre and post test. Being that this is a pilot study, our first time out of the chute with this intervention, we figured there was not likely any harm for seeing if we could detect any change on this measure. The next measure we use is the Penn Emotion Recognition Task. This is a computerized task administered to the child. It's a series of faces representing basic emotions: happy, sad, angry, surprised, and calm. And it's varying degrees of intensity of these emotions, and children are simply asked, this is Karen, what is Karen feeling? And they are asked to provide the emotion. So we administered this pre and post test, hoping to impact change in this ability. Next, we use the Vineland Adaptive Behavior Scales. We use this as a measure of adaptive behavior, but we were primarily interested in the communication domains and the socialization domains, as we were really hoping to be able to impact those skills. We use the Test of Pragmatic Language, second edition, the TOEFL, as a measure of pragmatic language, or the social basis of communication, so not just how we speak or understand speech, but how we use our communication in a socially modulated way. So we were hoping to be able to impact that, and administered that pre and post test. And then our social validation questionnaire that I just described, kind of getting at the parents, child, and teacher's perception of this work. I'm going to discuss specific results of the pilot in conjunction with specific results of the study we're currently working on, since the findings are very similar. But before we move on to discussing the next study, I wanted to highlight some of the main takeaways from the pilot. First, we did find, and I'll show these specific results in a minute, but we did find promising improvement on measures of pragmatic language, expressive language, social relationships, and overall adaptive behavior. So we're seeing results in the right direction. Some statistically significant results, enough to definitely warrant further investigation. We established the difficulty of having the program after school and the difficulty of transportation between schools. So one of our major targets for the next intervention was to run it during the school day, because this really limited participation of a lot of kids. It decreased access to it. Kids who could not get picked up at 4:30 or 5 couldn't participate. And finally, although we were able to impact change on the TOPL, we couldn't get TOPL data on all of our participants. So some of our lower functioning participants were not able to establish baseline scores on this measure. So it was only administered to a sample of the children participating in our study. So the results of the pilot did warrant moving on and scaling the intervention up to a waitlist control trial. So we were fortunate enough to be able to establish a collaboration with the Director of Special Education from the Columbus City School District. So she was able to rally support of several principals who were willing to allow us to come into their school during the school day and run this intervention. So that partnership is really what has made this next stage possible. Our timeline for phase 2 is a little more intense. One major change moving from the first phase to phase 2 is that we have scaled up the intervention from 10 weeks to essentially 18 months, really an academic year and a half. So jumping down to when we were actually running the intervention, children started in January 2013, so spring of 2013, and went through May, the end of our spring semester. And then they picked back up. They were off during the summer and picked back up this September. So we're in October right now, and they will be continuing through May of 2014, at which time this phase will be complete. So the data I'll be sharing with you from this phase is really the pre-test data compared with this interim measure we took at the end of May. So we began recruitment for this last year in the autumn, and like I said, the group began in January of 2013, and then we took some interim data in May and June of 2013 to get some data before they went home for the summer, and then we'll collect data again in the following May. Of course, it's been brought to my attention that it would have been ideal to collect data again when they re-entered in September, but these questionnaires are relatively burdensome for the parents and teachers, so we wanted to try to limit how many times we sent those packets home. And to point out that in this implementation of the study, this phase, we did have a waitlist condition, and these children will have access to the intervention beginning in January. So they are getting a significantly shorter dose of the intervention, but it's really the same length as the pilot study, which we found to be effective, so that's justifiable. And then we'll be conducting post-test measures beginning in May of this academic year. So some important changes to the protocol as we moved into the second phase. We increased the dose of the intervention from 10 weeks to roughly an academic year and a half. And we added a waitlist condition to control for maturation of the participants. It was wonderful to show that we were showing improvement across time, but relative to what? So it was important to get that waitlist condition in there. We moved the intervention to being conducted during the children's school day. This we felt was a major accomplishment. It increased accessibility to the intervention, and it made for, most of these children had never participated in an after-school activity. So that was a difficult transition to go from, always being used to going home at the end of the day to staying after school, so this eliminated that. And we added periodic fidelity checks to the intervention. So we developed a core list of fundamental elements of the Hunter Heartbeat method, and then had a faculty from the theater department who's not directly involved in the work, but who is familiar with Kelly Hunter's methodology, we had her come in and periodically assess for fidelity to the critical procedures and standardization of the intervention. And finally, we removed the TOPL for this iteration of the study because we weren't able to get TOPL data on all of our participants. So these students were recruited through Columbus City Schools. We had roughly 28 kids broken into 2 groups. We've had some attrition, but we recruited from ages 9 to 14, again based on autism education classification and the absence of severe behavior problems. So measurement schedule we used here, very similar to before, ADOS to validate diagnosis, NCBRF, the behavior rating scale was used again to check for severe behavior problems. We used the PEN facial emotion recognition task again as it's a valuable direct measure with the child, whereas other data we're collecting is parent rating scales. We used the social skills improvement system as a rating for social skills. We added this in addition to the Vineland as we wanted to get more specific data on what we're really hoping to impact. And then we continued with our social validation questionnaire. Just at the end, we will be getting these parents' perspective on how they felt the intervention went for their child. So now to show some results, I'll be sharing results of both the pilot study and our interim results from Columbus Public kind of in conjunction. So this is data taken from Vineland domain scores of the children participating in the pilot study. So you have here pre-test or pre-intervention and post-intervention in the red. Same children, same 14 children from the pilot study. Sorry, I don't have little stars, but the statistically significant differences were in the daily living skills domain, which we had not anticipated impacting, the socialization domain, and then this was statistically significant, the total behavior composite. So again, this is not, there's no control for maturation, but this is pre-test, post-test differences in that pilot group. What we were a little more interested in than these broad domain scores were some of the subscales that we felt were really driving those results. So we found significant differences between pre and post-test measures for this pilot group of children for the TOPL composite score. So you can see that here. And this, although this is only a subset of the children, this is a valuable result because it's a direct measure on the child versus a rating scale. So, you know, we can't really code their social behavior across environments and across time, so rating scales are gonna be the best we can do for measuring some of those changes in social skills and social relationships. But we were pleased, even though it's only a small subset of the children, a modest subset of the children were able to complete the TOPL. We did show statistically significant improvements in that. We also showed improvement in the Vineland expressive language subscale and in the relationship subscale. So again, this is from the pilot study, our 14 pilot participants. We also have some interim results from the Columbus Public Phase 2 study. And here we found, again, this is comparing pre-test measures taken in autumn of 2012 and interim measures from the summer. And our analyses indicated that we did see an improvement in social functioning as measured by the SSIS and the Vineland, and improvement, again, in overall adaptive functioning as measured by the Vineland. So these improvements were noted, at least trending in the right direction, some statistically significant, some not, in both pre- and pre-post-test comparison, as well as comparison across the intervention and control group on post-test measures. So some of our results. First, the Vineland composite score. So this is an adaptive behavior composite. We found significant effects in the intervention group, but not in the waitlist group, pre and post test. So this is indicating that overall adaptive behavior is improving in our children receiving the intervention, where it is not improving in a statistically significant way in the waitlist group. Additional statistically significant results we found with regards to the interpersonal scale on the Vineland, and this indicated that children participating in the intervention had significantly greater interpersonal scores after 1 semester's worth of the intervention, whereas we did not see this change in scores for children not receiving the intervention. Again, several other domains with regards to the SSIS, we found trending in the right direction, approaching significance, and we're hoping that when we have our measures from May, when the children have received the full intended dose of the intervention, the 1.5 years, that these results will be statistically significant. So a few words about where we're headed next. Our next stage that we intend to begin in January 2014, so this spring semester, we will be starting a 3rd phase at Haugland Learning Center, which is a school for children specifically with autism spectrum disorders. So we've established that collaboration and are beginning the recruitment process at Haugland any day now. This will be an 18-month waitlist control trial with a slightly expanded age range. It's possible we'll go a little younger than 9 or 10, depending on response to recruitment at Haugland. And some changes, we have some changes in measures for Haugland. We'll continue to use the ADOS and the social skills improvement system, and we'll have also the social responsiveness scale in parents. So we'll have an additional social skills measure for parents. We're going to continue to use the PEN facial emotion recognition task, but we'll be working to develop a more nuanced subset of faces, as many of our children were reasoning through what facial expression each face was, even in the pre-test, due to their very obvious nature. So we're going to pick a subset of more nuanced faces to see if we can detect some more significant change there. We'll be continuing with the Vineland, and we're going to reintroduce the TOPL, because weighing the pros and cons of this measure, although we were not able to get data on every child, it is a direct measure with the child, which is valuable, and we were able to show some significant change. So we'll be reintroducing the TOPL, and then we're also going to introduce a teacher measure. So we'd like to get the teacher's impression of how the children's social skills are improving across time. And we will likely be using the SSIS teacher rating scale. And then we'll continue with the social validation questionnaires. So this is where we're headed. Another 18-month trial, again, hoping to find significant improvement. And we, in the research community, really value our statistically significant improvements, but I like to end with the fact that the research on this project is to establish whether or not it's effective as an intervention for treating the core deficits associated with autism. And it certainly could carry significant value as an intervention or a treatment. But we do not need any research to indicate what a value this has been to everyone who's worked on the project, how valuable it's been to the actors, how valuable it's been to the children, and how valuable it's been to the parents and teachers. So our analyses are important. It's important to collect data, but I wanted to close with some quotes from parents as they reflected on their children's experience in the intervention. The first one, I saw his face and heard his laughter at the last session and knew that he was enamored, he was engaged and soaking up the energy. and even participated as part of a group, and that is uncommon. My son usually wants to do nothing but solitary computer and video games, and for him to enjoy being in a social setting was great. At one point, he even said he wanted to be an actor. At first, I thought it's another research project, but when I finally saw it in practice, I thought, wow, they've really got something there. I see great potential for this type of program as far as learning emotions, expressions, thinking outside of oneself, imagination, and following directions. Watching my daughter follow the actor's lead in pretending was remarkable. And my daughter loved this class. She left happy and excited every time. She loved feeling included and part of a group. We noticed that she was trying harder at school to make friends. So these are some of...
You ready for questions?
Yes? Sure. Fire away, Dr. Miller.
As you know, like Mulder in the X-Files, I want to believe that you're going to get significant findings. I've been sending kids for acting lessons for about 25 years in the greater Columbus area with autism. And like those quotes, many of them have responded. I've also been sending them to dance, music, and gymnastics, both of which are intensely interpersonal and highly structured. But still, I would feel more comfortable if for research purposes you had some attempt to match the controls with the experimentals. And why did you do that, and are you going to do that?
That is a great question. So one of our limitations with the Columbus Public School District is that matching was not possible because children are nested within classrooms, within schools, as many individuals who work in schools know. So we were working with 3 different Columbus public schools, and due to the number of children in each school, and due to schedules of actors and schedules, many principals were not willing to have their children pulled out of any core content. So we were given very short amounts of time at each school when we would have permission to pull the children. And then we have actors who are students here, who have specific times that they are capable of implementing the intervention. So there was no randomization in Columbus Public, and this is purely for logistical reasons. So we had the people that could implement the intervention, hold on, Dr. Miller, and the people who could participate, and due to numbers, we had to pick schools that, now, all these are within the Columbus Public School District, so theoretically in roughly the same SES, no specific reason to believe children in one are different from the other, but we had to pick schools that would receive the experimental condition and a school that would wait.
But as a control for maturation, there is a huge database available through the ATN. And I'm sure with the thousands of kids in that database, you could match on some of these variables, and for length of time, age, and absence of drama lessons. So I would urge you to stick that in the next study.
What are your thoughts on matching? What are the important variables to match on?
Boy, probably initial Vineland scores, for sure. Age, and probably within 1 standard deviation of IQ. You know, you do some statistical tests to show that your matching is appropriate.
There are some, real proponents of matching, and there are some people that feel that it really creates this artificial subset of kids that are matched on all variables, but then start to systematically differ on another variable. There are some very interesting...
People who make claims for change have to subject their claim to test.
Absolutely. I'm in a very interesting causal inference class now that is exploring some statistical techniques used in the economics department that are really aimed at targeting just that, how you can make stronger causal inferences.
Stay away from finance.
Okay. So I agree that matching is an important component of talking about results. And one of our hopes for this trial at Hogland is, since all the children are from the same school, and they're all at the same place, and Hogland blocks their schedules such that every child in the same school has math at the same time. every child in the school has reading at the same time. So every child will be theoretically available during the time we have the intervention, so we should be able to take a step towards better matching or a more elaborate randomization process that hopefully would be an improvement of this next phase. So I appreciate your comment.
Hey Maggie, I was wondering if you guys have tracked other involvement in other interventions that your participants do, or if that's something to think about just in future studies.
That is something we just had a conversation about. We actually just created a data sheet that we'll be using at Hogland, where we're going to collect data on what interventions they've tried in the past, what interventions they're currently in, and we'll also track medication.
What factors did you consider to come up with an 18-month intervention? I mean, if you saw preliminary effects in just a 10-week intervention, why go with 18 months where you have attrition between school years?
So some of that was balancing our objectives from the psychology department with the objectives of the theater department. So participation for these students, the actors, graduate and undergraduate activities tend to roll with academic years and semesters. So taking that into an account. And also, we did find statistically significant results, but we were using non-parametric methods. We were using methods that we were hoping that if we were able to drive up the effect, we could potentially use other analyses. It would open us up for a wider range. So we felt that with only 1 hour a week, that it seemed like a reasonable dose. But no, that's a good question. I think that also getting schools on board for signing up for something, they went through an awful lot of trouble to have those children tested, and the work on that part of the teachers was tremendous. So to put them through that quantity of work and then say we'll be in for several weeks, pushing into your academic day versus we're going to do this for 1.5 years, I think made a difference to the teachers' excitement about involvement in the project.
Just cut this off. Thank you very much.
Thank you.